Hi, I'm Steve Hopkins, and this is PongNow, an interview series where we talk to interesting players and personalities. I have with me here today Adam Bobrow. He is a table tennis player. He is a table tennis entertainer, one of the most recognized voices in the sport, quite literally, having been an ITTF announcer and MC at some major events that we've all watched. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, as I say at the start of all of these, uh, the goal is to kind of collect stories, not just to do surface interview stuff, but honestly, we kind of start with questions just like any other interview. But let me start here. So I've been following you for a long time. And I'm going to go all the way back to saying you may be the best table tennis dancer of all time. I remember a video, which we're going to get to in just a second, which may have launched some of your extroverted career activities here. But I saw another video prior to that. So let's go back to high school and tell me about Michael Jackson.
Well, Michael Jackson, I don't know anyone who saw the moonwalk for the first time and wasn't blown away by it, but I was definitely in that large number of people. And dancing in general has always been something that I think just really appealed to me. Like it seemed like something cool. And I like the idea of being able to make people go, wow, that's so cool. How did you do that? So when I see someone do something that I'm like, wow, how did you do that? There's this strong desire to learn it. So when I finally met a kid in high school who knew how to do the moonwalk, I was like, we're going to be friends really intensely for like the rest of lunch right now until I have to go to class. And I went home and practiced all night. And then the next day I was like, wait, I think I forgot the details of the moonwalk. Can you show me one more time? And he did. And then I went home and practiced. And I grew up loving Michael Jackson's music. And as a stage performer, I don't know, he was just one of the greatest entertainers to grace the stage in terms of music of all time, in my opinion, at least in my lifetime. So yeah, when I was in high school, I auditioned as a freshman for a competition called Lip Sync, and I didn't make it. And I learned the moonwalk that year. And as a sophomore, I came back and I made it. I won the competition on one of the nights, got carried off the stage by upperclassmen football players who, you know, the types of people that you want to make sure you don't rub the wrong way and were really thrilled if they liked you at all. And then my junior year, I auditioned again, didn't make the show. The person who was casting thought it was too similar to the year before. So my senior year, I put together a cast full of dancers and choreographed a routine to Smooth Criminal. And yeah, that became a bit of a surreal experience. After winning that, I was able to perform it at a pep rally in front of the entire school, which is pretty exciting.
So I have the ability to go back and add some clips to this, and there may be a little YouTube Adam Bobrow as Michael Jackson bit in that pep rally showing up here. No, I thought that was really cool, but truthfully, it's kind of a lead-in. So you went on, you're playing table tennis, you're in Southern California playing, and you decide to create a video that all of us have seen. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I never know exactly how much to tell about this because a lot of people get really disappointed when they find out the details. The short of the story is, I had watched NFL football players, like really buff, masculine men, like ripped, scoring touchdowns after diving and flipping over somebody. Then they'd get in the end zone and they'd pull out this dance move that was like, you know, very sort of cute and girly and quirky and funny, but sort of the antithesis of what you'd expect from someone who had just completed a touchdown the way they had. And I love that sort of juxtaposition. For me, there's art and beauty in those drastic dichotomies. So I constantly am looking for that. I think for humor, for sake of art, entertainment. And I thought, you know what? If I were in the NFL, I could do a touchdown dance that would be so ridiculous and absurd. Like, these guys are funny, but mine would just be stupid, like the stupidest thing anyone's ever seen. And I was like, but I'm okay. Like, I'm fine with my physique, but at best as a kicker, and I still think that would be really, really dangerous for me to even set foot on the field. I'm not going to be in the NFL. And then I thought, well, what's my favorite sport? And at that point in my life, and ever since, and long before even, table tennis had been my favorite sport. So I thought, why don't I bring people into my world? Because most people don't see table tennis played as a sport anyway. And while I'm not the best specimen for a high-level table tennis player, I can still show someone something that maybe changes their impression of how the sport is played if they're used to seeing it in a game room next to, foosball or things that are more associated with rec rooms at college. So, man, I tried to avoid insulting any other hobby or sport in the process. But, I thought, let people see what table tennis is like and just be as stupid and ridiculous as possible and make something that would be quite entertaining. The interesting thing is the dance routine was it was improvised basically. And a friend of mine who's very active in USATT and NCTTA, who was my right-hand man for table tennis, we did a lot together in LA for a decade. I had asked him to cue up some music. I had actually queued up the music for him, but I think I didn't do a setting properly. And yeah, when the music was supposed to come in, it didn't. So I start the dance like this. I was trying to go cue the music without saying it, but it never started. And I thought, you know what, this might be my only chance. So I just have to start going. And I think the anger of the fact that it didn't actually play the music really sort of fueled the performance. But yeah, I stayed up all night editing about 7 different versions of that. I asked my brother what he thought, and when I released it, I thought, well, I hope this is good. And a few days later, I had experienced, well, here, you'll appreciate this part of the story. I was playing at our rival college, UCLA, which I also, I helped start their club and had a lot of friends there. So I would play at both USC and UCLA. And I was so excited because when I released the video, okay, I checked back a few hours later and it had maybe I think it was like 593 views. And I was like, whoa, that's great. This has only been several hours. That's like more than I have friends. And then I checked back a few hours later and it was at, oh no, I think the next morning when I woke up, it was at 893. And I was like, whoa, 893. That's great. And then right before I left for the day at lunch, it was like 1,200 something. And I was like, this thing's moving. It's got 1,200 views. That's crazy. That means people that I don't know are seeing this. And I was telling my friends at UCLA about it. And then we checked on one of the computers there, and it was over 8,000 views. And that for me was like I was so confused. I'm like, what's happening? And that was my first taste of like a viral video in any sense. And shortly after, Failblog picked it up and it passed 1 million views in a fairly short time. And then mine slowly caught up to it, and all these other sites posted it. And yeah, and it went in waves up and down. And one morning of a tournament, this is another story. Maybe I should save it for later. Have you seen Ping Pong Child Abuse?
No, I don't think so. At least I don't recognize the title. So tell me about, all right, before we move into a child abuse topic, do you still keep up with the dance celebration video? How many people do you think have seen it?
Well, it's tough to say. On my channel, I keep up just because I revived my channel after about 4 years of not using it at the beginning of 2019 and decided, you know what? This time I'm actually going to try really hard to maintain it and make it work. Because in the past I burnt out and it wasn't, I don't know, but so I keep an eye on sort of the statistics. I have someone helping me with my channel, and 2.2 million, I believe, is the version without music, or maybe that's the one with, and then the other one is 1.6 million last I checked. That's on my channel. But I think the most popular uploads all either got shut down due to copyright claims from third-party companies, or were aired in other countries on different platforms. Like in China, when Run Run was the social media before Weibo, that was, I think, where it had the most views. And then Good Morning
So
America.
it's at
Yeah,
least 3 million, and it could be 10 million.
we estimated it about 5 years ago to have broken 25 million.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even, I think more than that, to be honest. But just because there were so many different websites and so many different platforms that had several million views, one of which was over 5 million. So we added it up and we're like, this is well over 25 million. And that was years ago. But the good news is better things have come. So it's encouraging to see that it's possible to, continue improving in some way, I guess.
All right. I'm not sure that that's the ideal segue, but we can go back to child abuse now.
Sure. Child abuse needs no segues, Steve.
So, all right, tell me about the other video.
So in terms of, I was saying that there were ups and downs, like with, the spreading of the excessive ping pong celebration, which started off with a very different title. It was called If Chad Johnson Played Ping Pong,
Okay.
I think.
All right.
And then it became If Ocho Cinco, and then I decided to change it to Excessive Ping Pong Celebration because someone with more experience titled it that. And I was like, that's it. So the morning of a tournament, I was at Santa Monica College, and I showed up at the tournament, and people were like, Bobrow. I was like, what's up? And they're like, you're on the front of yahoo.com. I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, your video. And then they're like, 10-1. And I was like, oh, cool. And that was like, so everyone that I ran into that day, like a high percentage of people were aware of that. And I'm playing, I could not list names, but you can see them in the video, so I might as well. And it's funny. Anand Engineer, who was a promising junior player and was better than me, and at the time was better than me and got much better than me. He was the A seed in our round robin group, and I think he was like 2171. I was the B seed, and I was probably around 2100 at the time. And people often thought, oh, Adam's got advantages against little kids because he can lob really high, and that's got to be uncomfortable. And sometimes that really works, and sometimes kids are just incredibly consistent, or their serves are perfectly half long and they can block forever. So anyway, we're in the middle of this match, and he had an edge ball that normally we would apologize for. And I'm not the most mature person in the world, probably far less than even a 13-year-old opponent at the time. So I pointed at the edge of the table because he didn't apologize. And he looked at me like, and I said, oh, that hit the edge. He goes, so? And I said, you're not going to apologize for that? And he goes, no. And he was small. Like at 13, he probably looked like he was about 10. He hadn't hit his growth spurt yet. But not only did he say no, he then looked at me and he went, cho, with a smirk. And I was like, I didn't take it kindly. I was sort of like, okay, if that's how it's going to be, that's how it's going to be. And I was fueled. I was like ready to cheer and cho as loud as I could. Again, not super mature, but I'll stoop to anyone's level. Not always, but at the time and still probably. Anyway, we're playing. I'm waiting for a point. He goes way ahead. And finally, he pushes one into the net at like 7-1. He's beating me in game 4 to come back to send this to a deciding 5th. So he pushes it into the net, and I scream my head off. Everybody on 18 tables stops playing and looks at me. And I'm like, I realized it was pretty inconsiderate. So I go, 7. I pointed at him. I'm like, 7-2. And everybody laughed because it was sort of like the punchline of the video that was on Yahoo that morning. We get into game 5. I think he was up 5-4 at the time. We have a rally that right from the start, I lob and he's grunting. So when he grunts to hit it, he goes, ugh, and I go, ugh, like a grandpa, just like mocking his grunts. 32 shots into the rally, he hits the top of the net, and I have to sit down on the ground to get it because the ball's near my feet. I get the ball, get back up on my feet. He hits it wide to my forehand. I make that shot, and as I'm coming back to center myself, he hits it behind me hard. And finally, you hear his dad go, yes! And I dive. I hit the ground hard. I just flop, and I lose my racket. Now, without a racket in your hand, as you know, you have nothing to hit the ball with. The point, I mean, all your opponent has to do is hit it on your side of the table, and it's done. And I just, in a moment, was like, I have to run in and put pressure on him. So I came running into the table without the racket in my hand, and he missed the shot. And I screamed bloody murder, ran all around the court, high-fiving everybody I could just to rub it in his face, fell to the ground, because I really wanted him to taste that. And I went on to win 6 of the next 7 points and win the match. That was the only time I've played him. I don't even know if he's playing anymore. I'll never play him again. I mean, I would if I had the chance, maybe. But if I die tomorrow in a tragic routine gasoline fight or something, I will have lived my life happily. And that moment, I could die happy after that moment. So that was ping pong child abuse. And that was the morning that video you brought up was resurfacing on Yahoo.
All right, I think you just said if you die in a routine gasoline fight. All right, I'll let that go.
Zoolander?
Yeah. All right, so you played in college. You had the video that helped with your notoriety. You were doing MC stuff for this little USATT organization at major events. And then you got a big international break. So let's pick up there.
Wow. Well, so it was actually my second time auditioning for The Voice of Table Tennis. In 2011, I was one of the 5 finalists. I think that year had over 100 applicants, and they chose 2 people. I was not one of them, so I was either 3rd, 4th, or 5th. And 3 years later, I really wanted to go to Japan, and I realized I've been so involved and like loving table tennis and involved in many ways. I've got friends in the top 10, but I've never been to a world tour event, nothing that's world class. And then the world championships had this grand prize giveaway where you could not only go, but commentate, and all expenses were paid for. And I thought that might work. And some of my friends were like, hey, Bobrow, you should do this. You love talking. And I was like, yeah. You love table tennis? I'm like, yeah. So I stayed up till about 8 in the morning, maybe 7:30 the first night, trying to do this audition that they had where you have a 1 game of a match. I think it was Cho-and-Rei versus Shushin. And I commentated that until I was happy with it, sent it in. Oh, no, I didn't send it in. I sent it over to my right-hand man, who would prefer I don't say his name because he's the lowest key guy and the most selfless guy, and USATT and NCTTA both know exactly who I'm talking about. But he's my right-hand man, and I trust him like anybody and think he's an incredibly intelligent guy. I said, hey, anything you think I could do to improve this, if you don't mind? And he's like, sorry it took me so long to get back to you, like the next morning. And said, here are just a few quick thoughts. And he gave me 9 bullet points for how I could improve. And they were all brilliant. Every single one of them was like, well, how can I send this in now? There's no way. I have to re-record this. So I stayed up all night again. That was the night I stayed up till like 8 or 8:30 in the morning. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. I feel this represents me well. I sent it in, found out that I was one of the 3 finalists against actually one of the other finalists was someone who's been quite involved in USATT, Barbara Way, who's a better player than I've ever been and still involved in table tennis in many ways as far as I know. So yeah, she did a great job making it to the final 3. Lucky for me, there were many less competitors that year. And I was on a family vacation when they announced that I was one of the final 3. I told my family, I'm going to be back in 3 hours when the deadline hits, but for now I'm going to be at a computer writing everybody I've ever met in my life and encouraging them to vote. And I just thought, where have I been in the world? Who can I talk to? And I just pushed. And I think that in combination with people approving of my audition worked out for me. I went to the Tokyo World Team Championships in 2014. And I thought about it. I was like, why would somebody pay for my entire trip to Japan? Why would they spend on that? And then I realized, oh yeah, this is sort of like an internship. They're hoping to find somebody that this is an investment in the long run. they'll pay once and hopefully it's not a waste. If I suck, they'll just say, we hope you enjoyed your trip to Japan. And if I don't suck, maybe they'll say, how would you like to do more of this? Well, when it was over, they said, how would you like to do more of this? And I said, I enjoyed myself. I like my life in Los Angeles and where career is going, but let's talk. And we did, and I did some more work. It's a much longer story than that, the whole process. But the short of it is, by 2015, they said, how would you like to be our full-time voice of table tennis? And we worked out an agreeable deal. And ever since 2015, I've been commentating the majority, the majority of the major tournaments for international table tennis.
And that's probably a good point to ask. Here we are 5 years later, and where are you sitting right now?
Well, I'm sitting in my cozy home in Taipei, the capital city of Taiwan, where I moved about 3.5 years ago.
All right, and where was your last commentating event? When was that?
Well, I came back from Qatar, from Doha, on March 10th. Came back to Taipei then. I remember it well because it's related to visa issues. Normally, it's funny, when I moved here, I didn't even think about visa. Someone asked me and I was like, oh, I need a flight out? I had like 5 suitcases with me. I was prepared to start a new life and just see what it's like living abroad and learning a new language. And I had to quickly book another flight. But now, because of everything, temporarily on pause, I don't have that same luxury of, I only have 90 days. They extended it. But yeah, I remember March 10th quite well because it's relevant.
All right. And any word on when things are going to start up again? Has anybody talked to when they need your services again?
Well, I know they're very eager to get started because ITTF, this is their livelihood. When you look at percentages, I mean, they have other ways of generating income, but the overwhelming majority of it is event-based. They create world-class matches that are then sold to TV stations around the world, which is always interesting because people on ITTF, like they watch ITTV, often say something, and I let them know that, just for the record, it's really cool that you're watching ITTV, but I'd say 99.5% of the viewers, from what I've heard, and I could be slightly off, but well over 99% of the views that they get on table tennis are not on ITTV. They are televised. So, and they have other live stream platforms, but it's mostly TV. So ITTF wants to start as soon as possible. They just got their reviews back and scored really, really well. They were monitored for their performance as an international federation, a sports federation, and transparency was their highest scoring part. And they scored like they're second from the top. So they're very transparent. They're very good about making everything available. Even things that people often ask about and criticize, it's like, oh, that's all in writing. You can find the answer to that. Just most people don't go that. It's much easier to shout than it is to fact check or research. But I know they want to get started as soon as possible. They also want to keep the athlete's health in mind. And they have to be very careful because the main tournaments are the ones that count towards the Olympics, that also establish world rankings and therefore qualify players for the Olympics and qualify teams. They have to be very careful about not having a tournament that qualifies people where maybe a travel ban wouldn't allow key players to be there. If they've got certain countries that aren't allowed to participate, it's going to cause some real uproar in the table tennis world because it could end up keeping someone off a medal podium or keeping someone out of the Olympics. So they've got their fair share of hurdles to jump, but they're actively working and looking at what they can do. It sounds like in the meantime, I just did the voiceover for the monthly Pongcast for ITTF, and I think the Czech Open, they're looking at having something that's sort of an alternative for those who can travel in the region, but I don't know how they can make it count towards world rankings. So
Right.
I'm curious to hear more about that. I think they're looking at having regional tournaments for sake of entertaining fans and giving experience to the players that can travel, but keeping it regional so that players can play where they are against the best they have in their region. until things open back up and it's safe to have the world tour again. That's my sense.
And probably September at the earliest, right?
That's sort of what the target is right now. They said last quarter of the year, which leaves, October, November, December. There are discussions about the men's and women's World Cups. They've once again postponed the Hana Bank World Championships that were supposed to be happening in Busan this year, which actually looks like it might push back Houston in the US later in the year. So there's a lot going on. I mean, with the Olympic Games, it's a big deal, of course, but it happens once every 4 years. So you've got 2021. It's not quite the traffic jam as, say, ITTF, which has, 16 to 17 major events every year, not counting the Challenge Series and the
Right.
junior circuit and everything else, junior and cadet. So they've definitely got their hands full, but I know that they have a lot of sharp people that are progressive and working hard on coming up with something as soon as possible that's a good solution, the best solution for everybody, I think.
All right, so shifting gears a little bit, you've been doing a series, Ask a Pro Anything. You've got lots of friends on the tour. You're always laughing and having a good time. Any good stories from either that interview series or from stuff off camera with any of those folks? Who's a good interview? Who's fun to hang out with?
Wow. I mean, I have tons of good stories, some of which are dramatic or not the way you would expect them to go, some of which might not paint me in the the brightest light. But in terms of friends on the world tour, you put a lot on the table there. I mean, I spend half of my year with these people, and they are not only people that I look up to for their skill set, but table tennis is a sport that is still on its way up. And while it's improving and has a lot of bright, I'd say, events and upcomings, on the horizon, the players are still very humble for the most part because they're aware that they are just a few losses away from having to become a full-time coach. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're a professional athlete, I mean, if you're in the NBA and, you're a star and you have an injury, you can still probably just tour, get some, signing deals and other things. Table tennis
A couple $1 million. Yeah.
You'll do okay without having to go start your own clinic. And you can if you want, but you don't have to. In table tennis for professionals that are, say, around the top 100, if things suddenly drop, suddenly they're not inside the top 200 anymore, table tennis becomes a really high-level hobby. ITTF is working hard to change that, but this all comes back to the point that they're all, in my experience, very humble, very real people, very down to earth. And some of the biggest celebrities have to be a little bit different. If you're on the Chinese national team, there are certain places where you arrive and there are, 50 fans that already know your flight time and what time your bus is arriving to pick you up, that are waiting there with cameras as good as some of the professional photographers down courtside. So, and you get asked for autographs nonstop at every meal you go to, depending on where you are. So some of those people learn that they have to handle their business and make time for themselves. But for the most part, table tennis players are incredibly down to earth and humble. Friends, I mean, my favorite hobby, my greatest passion is their greatest passion. And if you think I've learned a lot about statistics or head-to-head and info like that, I mean, the players know like a ridiculous amount. Talk to Kunuk Ja. He can tell you anything and everything. Like, it's amazing how many points he earns from what. I mean, really the ins and outs of the game. So I love talking to the players. I love talking to the coaches. And I love making friends in general. So, the players are incredibly friendly. I mean, I have a long list of people that I consider good friends at this point because, we coordinate for meals. I'm always welcome at their table, and they know they're always welcome at mine. And I try to mix it up. I try to socialize with a lot of people. In terms of stories, because you asked about stories with Ask a Pro Anything, well, There are a lot of stories. I think the most unusual stories, maybe, wow. Well, there's Zhang Jike, there's Timo Boll and Dmitry Ovtcharov. So Dima, let's start with Dima. He had a rough loss, and we had coordinated a time, and I think it was in Germany maybe, but he was somewhere where he could just drive and leave. And I think he's a player who's got a lot of obligations to his sponsors, to also to media. I get it. I mean, it's tough to keep track of everything. And I think he just wanted to get out of there. So we were supposed to meet. And when I reached out to him to say, hey, where are you? He's like, I'm so sorry. I'm halfway back home. I'm on the road. I'm a few hours away with, the wife and the fam, whatever the deal was. And at the time, I felt very like, dude, you said we had an agreement. But he said, let me arrive. Maybe I can record it with so-and-so. And let me make it up to you. I said, okay, let's see what we can come up with. And he said, how about if Jorgen Persson hosts it? And so that's the one episode of Ask a Pro Anything that I didn't host. I made a silly intro for it, and JP, Jorgen Persson, was the host for that episode. So that's one. And Timo is unbelievably down-to-earth, low-key, and chill. I mean, from the first time I met him, he was in a very easy position to sort of snap his fingers. He's always in that position. He could always get whatever he wants in the table tennis world. But someone was offering him a bottle of expensive alcohol in Los Angeles when we were there to do an exhibition at Spin in LA. And they're like, we can have it sent to your room. He's like, oh, I'm okay. He just like, oh, I'm okay. Yeah. He had a glass of water. He's like, that's fine. I mean, it was amazing. And he stayed for every single person to get as many autographs as they want, as many pictures as they wanted. People got back in line. People had a stack of things for him to sign. He signed every single one. I mean, he was the last person to leave. He wanted to make sure that everyone was happy before he left. He thought of it as I can do this. So for our Ask a Pro Anything, he also had a tough loss. I think it was to Vladi in the semis, maybe at the German Open. And he was exhausted. He was not mentally in the place to do it. And he's like, Adam, we'll make it happen, but it can't be now. And it ended up taking a really long time. And when we finally got around to shooting Ask a Pro Anything, it was 30 minutes of, I used to do all the editing for Ask a Pro Anything. And I felt like we could release the entire 30-minute conversation and it would have been watchable and interesting from beginning to end. He was hilarious. We had so much fun. There were a few things in there that we might have had to bleep, or I wasn't sure if they would pass, but they ended up making it, and he was a riot. So those are a few short stories. I mean, the list goes on, but I don't think we have time.
All right, so that's probably a pretty good place to stop. We may have to do this again at some point. I think there's probably some other subjects that we could breach and go in different directions, but I think 30 minutes or so is probably right where we are, and that's probably a good length for an interview. So hey, I appreciate you taking the time and lining all of this up. You're a lot of fun to listen to. You've always been an interesting, extroverted guy in person, and I'm looking around the apartment you're staying in. Clearly you haven't lost, some of that flair and stuff too. But we'll have to do this again sometime. So, again, thank you very much for joining me here on PongNow.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Good to see you.
All right. Thanks a lot.